This is episode 77.
Yes, that's a long time, but there's a reason for it.
Exactly. In fact, I was just looking back at the dates here because they're all on Wiki for Men. So if we look at them, episode 75 was on the 26th of April, episode 76 was on the 10th of May, and now we've got episode 77. Well, for me, it's the 21st, and I think it's also the 21st for you, isn't it? 21st of June.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
21st right now.
Yeah, so we haven't had, in actual fact, episode 74 was the 8th of March. And episode 73 was the 8th of February. So in actual fact, we've had a few months where the episodes have actually been infrequent, but I think
Mm.
that's been a temporary problem. And as you say, there's some reasons and some good reasons. And I think we'll be back on a more regular schedule going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So,
Hopefully we don't get sick or anything. So.
quite right, exactly. So we were both in Japan at the same time.
Mhm.
And we had a chance to meet up.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the point where you people should be seeing something on your screen right now. This is in post. Yeah. So we're not, as you can tell, we're not much of picture takers, right? So it's only like we only took like two pictures the whole time we were
Exactly.
there. Not granted, we were just there for like a couple of hours together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and we basically had our families meet up. Basically, I say families, but it's just my wife and myself, and
Yeah.
and then I've ever actually been in Japan actually. Uh,
And it's
I thought Tokyo and some other places were busy, but it's quite active
pretty
here.
busy. And it's a center for manga and anime and pop culture and that sort of thing.
Mm.
And all sorts of fun. We found some fun t-shirt shops and there were Magic the Gathering card shops
Mm.
and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty hard pressed to find any Magic the Gathering, to tell you the truth, because the big used goods retailer there, Book Off, there's like a billion of them around that part of Japan. Doesn't carry any Magic the Gathering. It
Hmm.
carries any other card game. It can do Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, Duel Master, any of that, but no Magic. So we had to kind of go into specialized
Mhm.
stores to kind of get some, it seems to me.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we still found
yeah.
in that area, 4 or 5, because it is such a big area and so busy. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was fun. So it was good. It was good to finally meet up.
Yeah. Yes, it was great.
Yeah,
I was glad to meet you, and my wife was also great to see you. He said so.
same exactly. It was lovely meeting your family, meeting your wife, and
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, so then we flew home the following day. So we just came up to Tokyo for a couple of days, and so we
Mhm.
flew home the following day, and then I think you flew home a few days after that, and then had a bit of jet lag. In my case, there's no real jet lag from Japan, but I think you guys
Mhm.
got a bit of jet lag then after that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was one of the reasons. That was the reason it wasn't on last week because we both just got back from Japan and we were both pretty tired. So. Next thing on our list, I want to talk a bit about sci-fi. This is something we talk about a little bit. There's two entries in the category of sci-fi that I want to talk about. First one is Stargate. So we know, of course, that Star Wars has been pretty much ruined by woke, and Star Trek has been pretty much ruined by woke, and not just woke though. Actually, sometimes they're just awful stories as well. Even aside from that.
Mhm.
Yeah, like with
Right.
Star Trek Discovery, I never got as far as it being woke, as I've said before. It was just terrible. Anyway,
Right.
yeah. Anyway, so my favorite franchise, sci-fi franchise, is Stargate, and they were going to produce a new series. And of course, I was immediately a bit concerned about this because I thought they were just going to go and ruin it the way they had everything else. But they got back a lot of the original writers and original producers, and they put them in and they put them together, and they were working on it for several months. And I'm thinking, okay, it might be all right, and I'll watch it and give it a go. And then
Mhm.
about 2 weeks ago, they unceremoniously cancelled it. It was Amazon.
Mhm.
Just unceremoniously
Okay.
cancelled it. Yep, and all the writers been working on this for a number of months. They're all out on their ear now, I think. So I don't know if maybe they get reassigned, but they're certainly not working on this anymore. There's been a huge pushback. And I'll get to the reason why in a moment. Amazon hasn't actually come out with any official reason, but there's been a reason that's been leaked as to what's actually behind it. But there's been a huge pushback from fans, and they um, haven't actually reinstated it yet or said anything about it. But there are some people who've, like previous producers of Star Trek and so forth, I think there's a fair chance it might happen given that their pushback's been so hard. But the reason that they apparently cancelled it was reputedly that they thought it would interest only previous fans. So this could be code for it wasn't woke enough. And so,
Mm,
yeah, so the original writers were actually producing something they knew the fans would actually like. And obviously
okay.
that didn't tick all the boxes, and that may be the reason it actually got canned. So
Mm,
this just coming from a few people who are insiders who have leaked information and so forth. That's what has been picked up. So
yeah.
anyway, it's yeah, I think that certainly seems plausible. It may yet
Mm,
come back. Oh, there's a possibility that if this one isn't revived, that they may go for a reboot, and
mm,
of which a lot of people are just expecting that to be totally awful, and a lot of actually fans are actually coming out and saying that they'll just boycott it because of what's
mm,
happened. Yeah, because of them killing the original plans.
yeah.
So hopefully it comes back and hopefully it turns out all right, but it's not looking great at the moment. So that would probably be the end of
Exactly.
Star. Go on.
No. I'm just thinking about all this. It's like who is excited for the idea of a reboot, really? It's like, people like continuity, and and you just starting over. You just I can never understand like many iterations of a given movie franchise. Just starting over again, and then they're starting over again,
Yeah, I agree.
and so forth. It's just, yeah, I just don't understand. Why do we need a new take on things? I hear defenders going, well, maybe it's a new take. Well, why do we need a new take?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm a big fan of world building, and of course, I'm an INTP, as we've discussed before. And apparently, this is something that INTPs really love. So maybe INTJs too, as well. I don't know, but probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most
So
of them.
big fan of world building. So if you build an intricate world that's internally cohesive and so forth, internally consistent, that's something that'll really interest me. And of course, rebooting is the antithesis of that. So if you go around and throw everything out and start again, you've immediately massively
Mm,
reduced my interest. So yeah, so same as you. I just think this whole idea of rebooting everything is
yeah.
just a bit silly, and I would
Mhm.
much rather see them build on what was before and make a even more intricate universe. But
Exactly. Yeah.
see how that
And you
goes.
know me, and you correctly note that I'm an INTJ, or at least consistently test as such. And and I've already talked about this. I've been creating a new world. I have been world building. I've because of the new series I'm working on, which I still
Nice.
can't divulge much, but
No, that's cool. That's
uh,
cool.
mhm,
And I've done a bit of world building too. I've never released any of the information. Maybe one day I will. I sort of started
mhm,
penning something actually, rather than the rough notes I've got it. Maybe I will release something at some stage. Yes, and of course, the reason I feel comfortable saying this is because you have said you're an INTJ on an episode
mhm.
previously. So yeah.
Right, sure, yeah.
So that's Stargate. At the moment, it's officially cancelled. That may change, but probably not. So
Right.
the next one I want to talk about is Blake's Seven. Now, I don't know. I've mentioned this before, but apart from me mentioning it, have you
Mhm.
ever heard of it, or do you know much about it?
Well, I've already kind of talked about how much I have heard about it, and how pretty it's one of the more grimmer ones, but
It
still
is.
admirable.
It
Yeah,
is.
right.
So,
So
all right,
yeah.
I'll give you the quick rundown on Blake Seven. It's a British sci-fi series that ran from 1978 through to 1981, 4 years. And Australia and New Zealand tended to get a lot of British TV when I was growing up. So I
Mm,
watched a lot of British comedies and that sort of thing. And Blake Seven was a natural fit. Doctor Who obviously is another one that was
mm,
big here during that era.
yeah.
But Blake Seven was yeah, very big in Australia among kids and adults. It is a grim dystopian future. It is in many ways the anti-Star Trek, as I think I
Mm,
have talked about in the previous episode. But there is actually a Federation in Blake Seven, and I think it's a deliberate reference to Star Trek because it's an autocratic organization. It's
Hmm.
the population of Earth is doped up on drugs, so they don't rebel. The outer worlds, they have the Federation has other worlds where they sort of use more of a traditional, military force to keep the population down. And on the
Right.
fringes, their power wanes. But Blake is a former, at the start of the series, Blake is a former revolutionary leader. He was framed with false charges of child sexual assault and jailed because who wants to be associated with somebody with charges like that
Hmm.
on them, right? So that was all false, but that's what the Federation used to publicly denigrate him. And later on, he's released, and his memories are raised, and his old compatriots from the revolution try to sort of get him back into the fold and get him as a revolutionary leader again. And he's caught, sent off to a sort of a prison planet. And while he's on the way to the prison planet, they get a bit sidetracked, and he manages to escape. And he sets up basically tries to fight the Federation and try to take down the Federation. And because it's decades ago, I'm just gonna tell you the spoiler, how it ends. He loses. They all lose. So
Hmm.
our heroes, Blake and his crew, yeah, the Federation wins. Probably kills them at the end. It isn't clear whether they're dead at the end or not, but they're either dead or captured. And the
Hmm.
Federation wins. I mean, he did a lot of damage to the Federation while he was going, but it's on its feet at the end of the series. So how's that for a dystopian ending? So the bad guys win.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway,
All right.
so there is talk about bringing it back, which I think would also be a reboot. However, in this
Hmm.
case, I fully expect it to be woke and terrible, and I'm kind of hoping they don't bring it
Yeah.
back. But if they do, yeah, yeah, it's probably going to
Well,
be
well,
terrible.
what is there to tell? Blake dies, right? I
Well,
mean,
yeah. Well, okay. So there was a plan. One of the actors had a plan for because that was the thing at the end of the season four. You didn't know if they were dead or not. And if they'd been renewed for a fifth season, anybody who was coming back who signed a new contract was going to have survived, you see, and then maybe they'd escape or something like that. But one possibility that was actually put forward by Paul Darrow, who played Avon in it, and this was about 20 years after the series was produced, and he had a really great idea. His character, Avon, had languished in jail for 20 years and had essentially was forgotten at this point. And eventually Avon perhaps gets away or something like that and restarts it with a new group of revolutionaries, and they carry on a new series that way. So I thought that was quite a good idea, but they never got that off the ground. Um,
hmm.
but chances are that looks like this will be a reboot, and in which case, yes, they would just start over. Which
Yeah.
yeah, same as we said before. I'm just very concerned about if they make it woke and they use the modern storytelling techniques. I'm not sure it'll work, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, so
Hmm.
those
Yeah,
are the
for sure.
two areas in sci-fi I wanted to mention. Um, it is actually Father's Day in North America, so
Absolutely.
happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. It's not, as some people in North America think, Father's Day everywhere. So Father's Day here in Australia is actually sometime in September,
Hmm.
which made it was great. Was made a great fun when it was Father's Day in September and I was living in North America. I had to plan months ahead to get a Father's Day card because I had to go and buy one while they were available in North America, and then leave it there for a few months, and then post it to Dad.
Hmm.
So it did
Yeah.
require some planning.
Hmm.
Anyway, so yes, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I hope you all have lots of time with your kids. We know that there are lots of dads out there who don't
Right.
get lots of time don't get time with their kids.
Yes.
Um, I also wanted to talk about woke a little bit. Let's go
Okay.
more on.
Okay. Yeah, I had some to add there. So,
Yeah.
I was so during my vacation, apparently, well, it's not just U.S. that's Father's Day.
Yes.
It's actually Father's Day in Japan also.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and I saw a lot of stuff in stores for Father's Day, and you know, it's good. It's there's a lot of wholesome stuff that it is themed like it's like a really thankful kind of a thing compared to some of the stuff we're seeing here in the United States.
Nice.
And yeah. So I should have taken pictures. I'm bad at taking
Yeah.
pictures, but there was some good stuff. It's just really wholesome, thankful sort of sentiments, and it just comes across as more sincere than the United States. So it was good to
Yeah.
see. Is all I really wanted to add to
It,
that.
it it's nice to think, isn't it, that there are some countries and cultures out there that haven't
Mhm.
fallen to this sort of thing and that are
And
still maintaining the family unit in a better
and
state. I understand
okay.
divorce is still relatively rare in Japan. That's what I've heard anyway.
Well, there's that, but I think the big thing that people talk about is the declining birth rate and something like that.
Well,
But
yes, that's a
I
serious
mean,
problem.
but so
Yeah.
maybe we could take that to be true. However,
Yeah.
during my time over there, I can't go 1 hour without seeing at least several mothers carrying their kids around,
Mm.
their little toddler kids around during their shopping or something like that. So, you, you know, every time we talk about the falling birth rate, uh, one might kind of assume that Japan is becoming more barren or you just don't see any kids
Like a
around.
child
But
desert or something. Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
you can go. I mean, granted, I think I was staying in a more busier part of Japan anyway. But it's like every time I walk around in places like stations and like
Mm.
shopping malls and even out in public, there's some woman carrying their kid with them or two kids with them or
Mm.
something. So it's like, you know, there are still, you know,
Yes.
the next generation being made and everything. So I don't know, maybe uh things are starting to change, or maybe things aren't quite as bad as we make them out to be. I don't know, I'm just kind of talking off my head here.
No, that I know you make a good point. And I've also seen a fair number of kids in Japan as well, and I did think of that too. I thought, well, about the how often they talk about the shrinking population. I mean, I don't doubt the official figures. I think Japan's population is shrinking, and the birth rate is very low. But I guess it's a good reminder that it's not a zero birth rate. There are, especially in large cities. There's probably a fair number of kids around. They do talk about some
Yeah.
of the villages getting very old and closing schools and that sort of thing, but.
Mhm. Yeah.
But you're right, it isn't a zero birth rate. There are lots of kids. Of course, the birth rate, if it's falling too fast, that becomes a problem. But
Mhm.
yeah, so there certainly are kids being born, absolutely. And as you say, you see them around. Yeah. I wonder if
Mhm.
there is a phenomenon because there can be a bit of a phenomenon, with say, only children, if perhaps they're the only child and the only grandchild, they get, lavished with love and not necessarily spoiled, but, a lot of attention and so forth. And I wonder, perhaps that could be happening too, because in a lot of cases, maybe there might be a couple of kids, maybe they're the only grandkids or whatever. So you may find that, yeah, all the kids are getting lots of attention from adults. And actually, on the topic of kids too, one thing I saw it in Japan myself, and I think it is very cool.
Mhm.
Quite a lot of younger children go to school alone, and they'll get on. I saw kids getting on, like little six,
Oh
7 year
yeah.
olds getting on the subway, and or getting on the
Yeah.
streetcar, and yeah, going to school, going home, and
It
yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's something I was privy to back when I was a kid. I didn't
right,
take the train. I was really close to my school and everything like
yeah,
that. But it's a known thing, people do
absolutely,
this,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
and
I saw myself there, kids getting on the streetcar, and yeah, little
yeah,
kids, yeah,
there's a much more relaxed attitude
mm,
about that sort of thing. Where I think in places like the United States, there's this kind of freak out about free range kids and
mm,
so forth. It's like um, they're always talking about stranger danger, and because there's like a lot of paranoia and stuff
yeah,
like that. But in Japan, kind of people, contrary to to a lot of popular opinion, especially from the outside countries, people kind of just mind their own business, and
mm,
they
mm,
just they're just going to schools or coming back from schools and everything.
mm,
So they're pretty competent, kids,
yeah,
so they
no,
know what to do early on, and
that's.
I'm sure the environment, the distance, all kind of factor into this. So
No, it's really good. That's right. It's right. It would teach self-reliance and give people more confidence because they will have
mhm.
dealt with these things when they're really young. And yeah, exactly. Versus in the
Right, yeah.
West, there can be a bit of a tendency towards people not being self-reliant and being anxious, and we see a lot of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah. So anyway, if we didn't have anything else, I was going to move on.
Yeah, we can move on. Yeah, sure. We're talking about woke.
Yes, so I've been reading just recently. I mean, it's been academic studies on these topics before, but I'm sensing a kind of a little bit of a change in the tone in some of the academic studies recently, and they're a
Mm,
little bit more willing, not necessarily to criticize woke, but to call it out for what it is,
mm,
and raise concern or point out flaws in it. So it doesn't get to the point of being criticism, and that's probably not an academic paper is probably not the place for that, really, but more pointing out flaws in it and so forth. And
mm,
I've also noticed they're using a more formal language. And one term that I've seen used for woke in academic papers is radical progressive ideology. And that's
all
a
right.
term I'm going to be using more often to refer to woke. So,
Okay.
yeah. So just if I'm talking about it in a more formal context, I'll probably be more likely to use that than woke, I think. So
Mm,
it's pretty much a close to a one-to-one correspondence between the two. And some of these papers are even offering definitions and that sort of. I mean, we have a definition in A Voice for Men. We
mm,
often see wokies claim that we don't. How do you define woke? Well, we have a definition, and some of these academic papers provide definitions. So, definitions are out there. So
mm,
anyway, I just thought I'd mention I'm kind of sensing a change, and this goes along. And there's something I've seen before, and it goes a lot. It sort of touches on this again that there's been in the particularly last 5 years, there's been a change in society, and a lot of society isn't tolerating this stuff anywhere near as much
mm,
as they used to. They're
mm,
still in academia, and they're still in although not all of it, as we can see from these papers, they're still in academia. They're still in the media, very much so. And they're still in government, and they're still having a lot of influence in government. But I feel like there's a lag that a lot of those people got into those positions sort of 10, 20 years ago. Um, and no doubt they're still facilitating people like themselves getting in. But I do think there's a lag. Meanwhile, the society is pushing back quite a lot more. So I think we've turned a corner. I know a lot of people aren't very optimistic about it. I'm not an optimist by nature. I'm really not. But
mm,
my feeling for quite a few years now is that probably around 5 years ago, I think we kind of turned a corner, and a lot of it's lost a lot of its power. But there's still a lot of inertia in it because the laws
mm,
have been implemented and they're in the system and so forth. So, but I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of it. And feminism, of course, has been involved in a civil war for the last 5+ years. So that's essentially, I think feminism's back is broken in terms of its authority
mm.
at this point. I said a lot of them are still a lot of powerful people still, adhere to it, uh, but I think it's eventually it will change as a result of this. So anyway, and the next item actually kind of touches on this too, actually. So I don't know. I've been doing a lot of talking, but jump in there.
No, 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 it's okay. I'm just kind of surprised that this is happening at all in a critical capacity.
Well,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it's nice,
yeah.
isn't it? It's to a certain extent, the internet allowed work to propagate, but the internet has also allowed us to propagate, anti-work or based information. And I think that it's probably more effective because the internet will benefit the outsider more than the insider. So I think we're probably getting more, but even though they were successful in propagating their ideas, I think we probably can overall be more successful in propagating our ideas via the internet because the sort of the barrier to entry is so low. And also to even think that the power of big tech is starting to wane. I've been raising concern about big tech for a while, and I mentioned it explicitly in
Mm,
my 2023 ICMI presentation. By the way, that was in
mm,
India. And even though it was pointed out that most of the audience, something like 80 to 90%, was actually employed by big tech, um, I actually got a lot of positive feedback over that. A lot of people agreed with me that
oh, good.
there was real risk there and real problems there. I feel that it has improved somewhat, and it will continue to improve. So,
Yeah, I do think it's improving in some ways or not. I mean, one point of uh, pessimism that I have is that the reliance on biometrics is kind of proliferating. Since we're talking about, I don't know if this is something adjacent to what you kind of had in mind with the tech thing, But they're really kind of going nuts with the whole biometrics thing as of late, and it's really about, in like in more in certain situations, it's more about collecting info on
Mm,
the subjects instead of any kind of protecting kids or whatever.
mm,
And I'm just kind of shall we say, kind of on yellow alert as to how uh, readily people kind of give their biometrics. Even
yeah.
I'm not clean myself on that one. Here or there I've done it, but I have avoided facial recognition so far.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's yeah.
No, that is actually a really good point, and it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're out of the woods, and there's and in fact, new
Oh yeah.
problems will continue to appear because, see,
Mm,
this is all new. Nothing like this has ever had. The internet appearing, nothing like that has ever really happened. At least not so quickly. But people could argue that, say, the development of the printing press was similar and so forth, but there are new
yeah.
challenges with the internet, and the speed with which some of these things occur absolutely makes for problems that society has not encountered before. And that is a good point about biometrics. I've been fairly good too. However, many a growing number of countries are requiring your fingerprints and in some cases your photograph to to enter the country, and essentially your choice is to accept that or not enter the country. So yeah, so
Mm,
my fingerprints are on file in a number of countries. I think they do eventually
yeah.
destroy them actually, but
Yeah.
after a number of
Right. Yeah.
years. But yeah,
Mm,
so this is potential, and DNA, of course, obviously is because there's all sorts of stuff, information that can be potentially derived from your DNA in terms of potential health problems and
yeah.
so forth. And
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there are these
Yeah.
challenges. I was going to
Yeah.
say,
It's like.
yeah, go on.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's the ethical use of such a thing. It's just, and depending on where we look, and when the state is trying to do things to their own citizens, it's kind of there's cause for skepticism, to be sure.
Yeah,
When you watch something like Star Trek, like everything seems so benevolent. Retinal scans are fine.
yeah,
Facial recognition is fine. Your handprint is okay.
yeah.
But it's like we need to kind of get to that point instead of kind of pretending it's all going to be okay. So I mean, there's vigilance is a good thing. It's a friend.
So as I've said on previous episodes, I've been a long time proponent of free and open source software, which of course is very much gone mainstream these days. And people who are involved in that tend to have a strong sense of freedom and protection of individual rights and so forth. Um, so it is something I've been concerned with for quite a long time. There's organisations like the Internet Society, of course, who do talk about and who do monitor this sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, the big tech is certainly there. May be. I wouldn't even say that. I was going to say they're down, but not out. But no, they're not even down. So they're still very, very powerful. I just think that their
Mm,
grip has weakened a little bit. I just want to remind everybody, though, that there's been a tendency to move towards social media platforms. So during my time on the internet, which now is 34 years, so it was 1992. So when I first got access to the internet, and I got an email address. So back in those days, it was mailing lists and Usenet. Now most people have probably not heard of those, especially not Usenet now. And then maybe a decade or two later, you had forums and so forth, web forums that largely replaced, although web mailing lists were still around, and mailing lists still are around actually, but they're not very common. By the way, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the organization that essentially drafts internet standards that organizations and everyone adheres to, still uses mailing lists, by the way. So I think there's probably something in that for all of us. And until recently, they were still publishing the documents that define the standards. They're called RFCs in text only. I think they now are actually allowing a couple of alternative formats like PDF, for decades it was text only, so simple text files. So they've been very cautious about implementing new technologies. But so forums were very popular, maybe around the turn of the century into the early 2000s. But then you got the social media sites, and that's where big tech really started to take over, and everyone would be spending time on Facebook instead of on a forum or whatever it happens to be. But I just want to remind everybody that all of that stuff, is still out there and it's still in use, right? So there are still forums or that are they're independent of the social media sites. There are websites like A Voice for Men that are publishing independently. There are mailing lists. As I said, the IETF uses them. But you can set up a mailing list. You can set up a forum. You can, all these technologies and the software that you need to do it, it is all still out there. So if people want to resist or want to avoid social media and so much control from big tech, you can absolutely still do it. So,
Yeah.
so what we do is we publish on A Voice for Men, and then we post that link, post those onto social media sites. And A Voice for Men, of course, is set up in such a manner as the site can be moved very, very quickly. As I think I've told you before, there are backup sites. I think I regaled a little bit on that previously, where
A little bit, yeah.
yeah, exactly. There are multiple backup sites, and they're automatically reloaded every few hours, and they're tested and so forth. So if we had to pivot really quickly, if they shut down the site or something, I could bring up one of the backup sites very very quickly, no problem at all, and then deploy others. And I spent a good couple of years, in my copious free time, developing the automation for that.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, so I just deployed another backup site a few days ago. So doesn't take much time at all to do that. So I could
Yeah.
even automate a little further, but it's sort of maybe it's sort of 20 minutes work or something to set one up. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I just want to remind everybody, it's all still out there. You can run forums, you can run mailing lists.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to go on Facebook or Instagram and I think a lot of people have reached the point where that's when they think of the internet, that's what they think of, but it's everything else is still out there.
Hmm.
Similarly, I mean, the internet is enormous. I mean, it defies understanding how large and complex it is. And even if you think, people will use Windows, or maybe they're in the small group of people who use Linux on the desktop, like I do for the moment, although that's growing because people are tired
Hmm.
of Microsoft and Apple, getting
Yeah,
having too
yeah.
much control over desktop systems. But even then, most of the server-side software runs on Linux, right? But what I was actually going to get at is that doesn't mean that there isn't, FreeBSD out there, which is another operating system most people won't have heard of, or QNX, which runs nuclear reactors, right, and other and
Hmm.
other important infrastructure. There's also all this stuff's out there, and mainframes that are mostly running Linux
Hmm.
VMs.
Sure, yeah.
But it's all this stuff. The internet is huge, and it's all out there, and you can avoid big tech if you want.
Hmm.
Um, so that, I guess I did talk about this, I said in one of my presentations, but it's still all possible. It requires, in some cases, a little bit of work, and it can be a little bit easier to just go and create a Facebook group or whatever. And for non-controversial things, I'm not beyond just setting up a Facebook group, right?
Right, yeah.
For a local community group or something, that's fine.
Sure.
Yeah. But we places where it matters. I think you need to have better options, and they're all still out there. They all still exist.
Hmm.
So.
Okay. All right. So since we're on the subject,
Hmm.
you know me. So I do, Microsoft apps, right? I don't work for Microsoft, but the company is, I do .NET apps and
Yeah.
other Microsoft adjacent technologies as like my living and so forth, right?
Mm.
So suffice to say, I'm kind of I'm pretty entrenched. I'm most adept in the Windows things, but so how can someone like myself get uh foot their feet wet, so to speak,
Yeah.
in Linux? Is it do I rely on something like emulators, or is it something I kind of need to kind of get a Linux computer, get a full on startup,
That is a
or
great question. I'm glad you
any
asked.
invite? Yeah.
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 Um, I used to watch a TV show when I was a kid, actually. It was a side show, and that was that was sort of their tagline. Oh, that was a great question. I'm glad you asked. But seriously, that is the key question. And given the way Microsoft and Apple are working, there is a freedom aspect to this, as we alluded to before. So essentially, yeah, the question is, would you use a VM, for example, or you could use something, or multi-boot be better, or a separate computer? So there are three different options. One, you could use a VM, which is a virtual machine, for those who don't know. So on Windows, you get VMware or VirtualBox or
Yeah.
something like that. and you install Linux in it, that is in many ways a fine option, especially if you're mostly working in Windows but do want to do a bit of work in Linux. That can be a really great option. So also the other way around is possible too. You can run Linux and run Windows in a VM. People do that. I don't really do that anymore. In the decades past, I might have done it, but it is an option. Um, what I find though is if your aim is to learn Linux rather than just use it as part of your job or whatever, or for certain tasks, if you're sitting in a Windows desktop and you've got the Linux VM, you're probably not going into the VM except when you're doing something that relates to. There's another option called multi-boot. I'm personally not a fan of it, but other people make good use of it. You install both operating systems on your computer and you boot at boot time, you decide on one or the other, and you then run Linux or you run Windows. As I said, not personally a fan of it, but many people have used that to good effect. The third one is to say give yourself a separate computer and run Linux on the separate computer, right? But where I'm going with this is the key to learning Linux, if you're coming from a Windows world, is to use it. And too many people, as I said with the VM, um, they tend not to end up using it because you've got time pressures. You just want to get something done. You know how to do it in Windows, so you do it in Windows, right?
Yeah.
Right. Versus I'm actually trying to learn Linux. I kind of need to make myself do things in Linux. So multi-boot's probably a better option then because you boot into Linux, you're in the Linux environment, you're doing things. Windows is still there if things go pear-shaped for you, and as the Brits like to
Yeah.
say, and you need to boot back into Windows and deal with the environment you know. So one option with multi-boot is to boot into Linux, use the Linux environment, and resist the temptation to just boot into Windows every time you have a problem. Try to get it done in Linux. You'll get more comfortable in no time, but Windows is there as a backup. And of course, having a
Yeah.
separate computer is kind of a variation of that as well. So, yeah, so I think that the key is if you're going to learn Linux, you got to do Linux, and you got to kind
Yeah.
of get used to it. Now, having said that, Linux is um, different to Windows, and it's bigger than Windows. And this is kind of, whereas if I say, oh man, I really hated Windows 8, the desktop. I mean, with the big buttons because they were acting like it was meant to be a smart tablet or anyway, you know what I mean, right? And they,
Mhm.
and they,
Yeah.
right, you could, and there was a proper desktop in Windows 8, of course, and they changed it, I think, in Windows 8.1, so it was easier to get to the desktop, right? Everybody knows what I mean. Or man, the Windows, even as someone who doesn't really get into it, doesn't really like Windows. I'd say the Windows 7 desktop was probably not too bad, and everyone knows, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I know what the Windows 7 desktop was, right?
Yeah.
And oh man, I don't like Windows 11, the new environment, the new desktop on that, for example. And again, everybody knows what I mean because that's what you get when you install it, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it works in Linux. So in Linux, there is sort of no limit to the type of desktop environment you could have. And after 30 plus years of using it every day, I still haven't seen more than a small fraction of the options that are really available.
Mhm.
And it's that. So using Linux as a desktop user is actually kind of more about deciding what desktop environment you want because there are so many choices. And many of the distributions, because Linux comes in different distributions, I won't go into that too much, but they will usually have a default desktop, and a lot of people will just use the default desktop in that particular distribution. But there's nothing stopping you running other desktops, and many of the distributions will have sort of 4 or 5 set up for you that you can easily use. But there's nothing stopping you going right out left field and installing something that's completely different environment in a desktop. And one of the beautiful things about it is that Linux is multi-user, and it's multi-user uh, both in terms of people accessing it over the network and also on the desktop. You can have multiple people using the computer at the same time, all using different desktop environments. So you decide you want, I don't know, GNOME or something, GNOME 3 or something, and I want something else. We can sit there on the same computer using those at the same time, and it's not a problem at
Mhm.
all, right? So,
Right.
but yeah, you probably want to play with a few desktops and look at a few different desktops to get some idea of the sense of the breadth of options that are available because it really is enormous. As I said, I've never even scratched the surface really in many ways in terms of the
Hmm.
options. So I've got a particular environment that I use that I've set up myself, and even by the standards of Linux, it's fairly esoteric. But it's heavily optimized for my work, my workflow, and how I work, right? Which is the point, right? Um,
Yeah, I was about to say, it kind of allows for that modularity and kind of that personalization.
exactly.
So if this is um, the phenomenon of the open source, I guess some of us kind of worry about the collectivization of it, but there's a lot of individualization.
It's more
So
individualization.
yes, right, yeah.
Yes.
So that's it's a really good thing to keep in mind for
Yes.
someone
Sorry,
trying
cutting
to.
in there. I can give you some examples of that. Quite a
No,
number of
I'm done.
examples.
I'm done. So yeah,
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. But so in terms of the desktop, yeah, the have a look at the different options. Even if you picked, say, Ubuntu or something like that as an initial distribution, you'd find there'll be a number. There'll be one they prefer, but there'll be a number available in there. Have a look at the different options, find what works for you. And as you say, it is very much uh, about having what works for you. I'm a great believer the computer should bend to fit the user, not the other way around. And Windows very
Yes,
much kind of
yes.
forces this environment onto people, which may work for some people and it may work for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for everyone really well. And you should be able to choose the environment that works for you. And
Well, if you think Windows is bad, I mean, like I've seen Apple,
Apple,
that's almost yeah.
that's
You know,
right. You're
I
right. They're worse.
right,
Yep.
right, and it's always like these progressives using it, these kind of, I remember in college, like any given progressive had an Apple. So
It's also quite funny to see the self-professed communists sitting on an Apple systems. Anyway, it's like
exactly,
about as
exactly.
corporate as you can get, I think. Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
so in terms of the rest of the Linux environment, like the command line environment, if you're doing coding and that sort of thing, which you don't have to, despite what you may have heard decades ago, you would probably have to touch it, but these days it's been a long time since you had to touch a desktop environment in Linux if you didn't want to. All the package installations are all done through the GUI if you want. I'm old school. I do it through command line, right? But you can if you. In fact, I use something called Ansible and I automate a lot of it. But if you want to do it through the GUI, the GUI tools have been around for 20 plus years. They're all really, the graphical interface. That's by the way, that's what GUI means. Graphical user interface.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry for our audience. Uh, all those tools have been around for 20 plus years and they're all really mature and so you don't have to touch the command line, but if you are doing more serious computing work and you do want to touch the command line, you can similarly tune the environment there. The command line environment in Unix, which Linux is descended from, we could say, is called the shell. And there are many shells. And again, you can choose the shell that you want, and other people can use a different shell in the same system, and that's all good. And even then, you can personalize the shell heavily. And indeed, I have, along with my graphical interface, which is heavily personalized. My shell is heavily personalized, and I get it to do automatic. I automate a lot of the things that I want to do. And it just sorts a lot of that stuff out for me because yeah, that's what computers are for, performing tasks so I don't have to do them. So I'm very much into automation. Anyway, so yeah, it's a different way of approaching the same problem, and I guess it's probably great with you knowing two languages that are so disparate, right? Because I think that's kind of a good analogy. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
you can convey the same concepts in the two languages, but how you get there, it can be very different. And that's how I would liken
Yeah.
Windows and Linux. You'll get to the same endpoint of delivering what it is you want to do, but the way sometimes the way to get there or the sort of the thought processes maybe to get there can be different. But I really like it. I've always felt much more comfortable in the Linux environment. Some of the stuff you can do, at the risk of the risk of getting too technical, I'll mention one thing quickly. There are these little things called pipes. I don't know if you've heard of them, but you get to pipe from one process to another in Linux. It's inherent in the way the applications and utilities are all built. and you can essentially create this pipeline of different processes and very, very quickly build something that will process data. And a lot of the stuff on a voice for men is the back end, which is a lot of all I've automated, is all done through these sort of pipelines. So if you've ever seen the hot on the web that gets put on a voice for men. A lot of that's automated now, and that's all done through a script that runs every few minutes, and it's just a pipeline. It just picks up some data and it munges the data and figures out what I want and pumps it out and posts it on the site for me, and that's all. Yeah. So and you can get something running in a few depending on how complicated it is, a few seconds or a few minutes in a lot of cases to get the basic idea down because of the way the pipelines work. So there's all those sorts of things in there. And yeah, anyway, if you play, from a professional point of view, I would suggest it's a great way to go.
Mm.
And because Linux, I'll just say it because it's amazing how many people don't realize this. Linux runs the world and has for more than 20 years. It is everywhere. By the way, Android phones have the same what's called the kernel is Linux as a
Yeah.
Linux desktop system. It's the same internals. They just made the interface on top different. That's all. But you can actually copy code from a Linux desktop system over to Android. That's fine, and the protections that the system has internally in Android are the same as Linux, desktop system and so forth. So, yeah, it's in fact early versions of Android used to actually call themselves Linux internally, but they changed that at some point, unfortunately. So, but
Gotcha.
yeah, it is. It's the same kernel. So. Um, yeah, so as I said, the key is to doing it and yeah, just essentially just start solving problems in the Linux way of doing
Mm.
things. I think you'll probably really like too from professionally, you'll find it's very nice how integrated a lot of the tools are. If you pick something like Ubuntu or Debian as a distribution, on a Voice for Men, it's all Debian, by the way, which is you can see on,
Maybe.
on the site. So it's all Debian. Uh, a lot of stuff is integrated into it, and it's you just I want Python, this version. Run a couple of commands. It's all installed. All the versions are correct, and everything works the way it's supposed to. And it's the way it should be.
Mm.
Yeah, computing should
Awesome.
be easy and simple. That's my view and always has been. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. So no. So I guess I hope we didn't glaze anyone's eye, cause anyone's
No,
eyes to
no,
glaze
no.
over there. But yeah, I think that it's
Mm.
and anyone else out there, anyone else is aspiring to a career in IT, become familiar with Linux, even if you aren't planning to make it your focus of your career. You won't be sorry. Sooner or later, you'll encounter a Linux system, and you and your employer will be happy that you've got some familiarity with it. So,
Yeah.
highly recommend it. Yeah, and don't assume and learn to code. Don't assume that AI will be doing all the coding in the future. So, yes, continue to learn to code and continue to develop the thought processes that help you to learn to code, and then, of course, you can then take on to other parts of your life too. So, yeah, I know your experience. That's for the audience. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, there's, some things I really need to kind of brush up on to be sure. And being the Windows guy, I think some of this Linux stuff would probably help me in the long term. I just hope it's not too late for a guy of 36. So,
I don't think so at all. No, go for it. I think it's never. You can never say it's never too late. But I
mm,
think you're in your 30s. That's no problem. I think it's probably a good time actually, because I would
mm,
probably fair to say mid-career kind of area probably. Um,
yeah,
yeah, so I think that's a good place to be, and it is very very important. And if you look at, I mean, if you look at any research that's done, it's done on Linux these days. Any IT research is pretty much done on Linux. If you look at all the areas like DevOps and so forth, that's all focused on Linux. And
yeah.
so yeah, I think it's uh, as I said, even if it's not going to be a focus, it's a good thing to have in the background.
Mm,
Yeah,
sounds good.
yeah. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Southern Poverty, our old friends at the Southern Poverty
Hmm.
Law Centre. So the Southern Poverty Law Centre has been having a bad few years, I think it would probably be fair to say. There've been some serious accusations, there've been some charges levelled and so forth. The latest Now, I stress this is there are no charges against this individual at the moment, but there are some serious accusations that are being made. But the accusation, and it's related to some stuff that came out a few months ago that we talked about. The claim is that a senior official by the name of Heidi Burke, excuse me if I mispronounced her name, she has been informally accused of funneling money to her lover, who was a member or is a member of a neo-Nazi organization. Now, for those who
Mm,
may not know, the Southern Poverty Law Centre made its chops in the 1970s, essentially fighting white supremacy and that sort of thing. And there's I think probably in the 1970s they might have been doing some good, but it's been a long time since they were doing any good. And there've been a lot of problems since. And yeah, anyway, so yeah, the fact that this person is apparently in a neo-Nazi organization. Now, seems to be a suggestion that some money may have gone towards them individually. That's an accusation that's been made. And it isn't clear if some of that money also may have gone into the neo-Nazi organization as well. So, and it looks like the US Department of Justice may be planning to charge them. That's the way it's looking to me. So, again, not unfounded, unsubstantiated accusation at the moment. Um, but that's what it's the latest in a long line of problems and issues that the Southern Poverty Law Centre has been having, particularly over the last few years. This is the organisation that I think it was 2018 finally declared A Voice for Men to be a hate site, and then in
mm,
2022, because after having years of making it clear that after several years of making it clear that they had not done so, even though people used to claim they had, in 2018 they
mm,
did. And then in 2022, they withdrew this claim and said it was no longer a hate site. And their principal justification was I'd taken over and Paul didn't run it anymore. Thanks, SPLC, I think. Yeah. Um,
mm.
and they made XY Crew, Paul's new site, a hate site at the same time, which, as I said on the site on A Voice for Men, furthers the added supporting evidence to the claim that they're just targeting Paul, actually. So
Mhm. Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So I think with all their own problems, they might want to look closer to home than perhaps casting stones on others for the moment. So.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't. I mean, I was a kid in the 70s. Maybe the SPLC really did some good work. I don't know. I know that even in the 80s, there were some accusations against them and substantiated
Mm,
accusations of problems and so forth, which people can read up on their own. They're well documented. I don't know. Maybe they made a real difference in the 70s. I don't know. But progressively as time has gone on, I think there have been more and more problems, and I think the sooner the US government looks very closely at this organisation, even closer than they are at the moment, the better.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, great men of history is my
All right.
next one. So
Mm-hmm.
this gentleman today is Claude Shannon. Now, he was born in the early 20th century. I went and actually didn't write down his date of birth. Here we go. Here it is. 1916,
Mm-hmm.
died in 2001. So, yes, February 2001. So, it was before September 11. So, he never saw, I guess, the post-September 11 world, which is quite different in many ways. So, anyway, interesting character. He's a mathematician, computer scientist, and cryptographer. Wikipedia calls him a polymath, and I don't believe there are any polymaths anymore, so I refuse to call anybody a polymath. So, for those who don't know,
Mm-hmm.
a polymath is someone who has achieved greatness in multiple distinct areas. It has to be greatness,
Right.
right? I
Right.
mean, a
Right.
good example of someone who isn't a polymath, for example, is the computer scientist who wrote a science fiction novel. That doesn't make you a
Mm-hmm.
polymath, right?
Right. Yeah.
It might make him a novelist, right? But he's not a
Mm-hmm.
polymath, right? A polymath is somebody who's, a virtuoso in the violin and, got the Nobel Prize or something.
Mm-hmm.
That might make someone a polymath, right?
Right.
And I tend to contend that the knowledge is so complicated now, and there's so much knowledge, and it takes so much. you have to focus so narrowly in one area in order to master it that I don't really think there are any polymaths anymore. I think
Mm.
so. That's my. I don't know if your thoughts on that, but that's my. I tend to think since the 20th century, not so much. Go
No. I don't know if I'd go that strongly, but I
on.
see your point. I
I'm
think,
pretty hard on
um,
them.
uh,
Yeah, pretty
yeah,
hard
yeah,
on
yeah,
them.
sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if you have an interest that's, not enough to make you a
No,
polymath. You have
you
to
have
kind
to
of
achieve.
excel at something.
You have to achieve
Yes.
greatness. Exactly. Even I think beyond
Yeah.
excel, you need to be like Leonardo da Vinci, for example. Yeah, a very strong
Right.
case can be made that he was a polymath,
Mm.
right?
Right.
Because
Exactly.
in multiple areas that were quite distinct, he achieved greatness, as we know, right? So.
Mhm.
Michelangelo was a sculptor and also a painter, and you could maybe they're not distinct because they're both art. Maybe they're not distinct enough, right?
Mhm.
But perhaps, but he did achieve greatness in both of those areas. And for now I think about it, maybe that wouldn't even count because they're both forms of art. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah. So I tend to take a pretty hard line on this, and I
All right. Okay.
and I particularly dislike when I see people describing themselves as polymaths, which I do occasionally
Yeah.
see online. So
Hmm.
yes, I don't actually follow anybody online who
Right.
calls himself a polymath. That's a long-standing policy of mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I might have claimed to have aspired to
Yeah.
be a
That's
Renaissance man of something like that,
no problem.
but I'm not saying that I
No.
am right now.
And I'd even say Renaissance man is fine actually, because to me a Renaissance man is someone who's cultured and also knowledgeable in the sciences.
Mhm.
I wouldn't equate it with meaning polymath. I think to me a Renaissance man would be somebody who a good example actually would perhaps be the this I don't know, I've heard about the stories where the samurai warrior who could also do poetry and paint. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's more of a kind of a polymath. Sorry, a Renaissance man to me.
Yeah.
Um,
That's right. Hmm.
yeah. So there were a few mathematicians in Western European mathematicians in the 18th century too. I think who were quite accomplished in other areas too, and they were the classic Renaissance men. So anyway,
Right. Yeah.
yes, yes. So you can pick up a sword and defend himself, but he's also eloquent in academic conversation as well. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway,
So anyway,
Claude
Claude
Shannon.
Shannon, yeah. So I think he seems to have had a fairly unremarkable childhood, although he was very academically strong. At the risk of lowering the tone on the entire conversation,
Mhm.
he was born in Gaylord, Michigan, which I think is either
Mhm.
the best or the worst name for a town ever.
Gotcha. Well,
Uh,
it's not a unknown kind of a name.
no, it's
You see
not.
a Gaylord here or there, but
It's right.
still, no, like
It's both a surname
yeah.
and a first name actually, although it's fallen out of use largely, I think, as a
Yeah.
first name. Yeah. But yeah, so the town obviously when he was born in 1916, obviously it had a very different meaning. So,
Mhm.
but anyway, so that was where he was born. Thomas Edison was a childhood hero of his, and later in life he discovered that they were distantly related. I think that's kind of cool, actually. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so. I've got a relative I've mentioned a couple of times. I wouldn't say he's a hero, but I kind of think he's a really cool guy, and he did some
Mhm.
really great stuff. His name was Fenner Brockway, and he was actually a founder of the campaign for nuclear disarmament and so forth. And he knew all the cool people. He was British, and he knew all the cool people in London. Like he knew George Orwell. He actually wrote a letter of recommendation for George Orwell with Eric Blair when he went to fight in Spain, and he knew. What's the guy with the teapot? Oh, what's the guy with the teapot in orbit? That's terrible. I've forgotten. And then you think, what's he talking about? A teapot in orbit. Um, Russell. He knew um, Bertrand Russell. He knew Bertrand Russell, for example.
Bertrand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Russell's teapot. Yeah, was a philosophical. Was a thought experiment related to if a teapot was in orbit, how would you prove it wasn't there? It was just a sort of philosophical argument
Mhm.
demonstrating burden of proof. Essentially, that you've got to if you're going to argue a teapot's in orbit, you have to be the one to prove it. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah. So he knew Bertrand Russell, and and he's a relative of mine. He was my grandfather's second cousin, and I think I wouldn't even necessarily say I aspire to be like him, but I do think he was a great figure, and it's kind. I think I'm very happy that I'm kind of glad I'm. There we go. You look like you're on.
Hey.
Yay, excellent. So you're currently on your
Sounds good.
phone.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
well,
Right. Yes.
that's all right. We're
Um.
nearly done anyway. We can just finish it off and then yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry about that. Like
No,
my
that's all right.
computer likes to cut off internet for whatever given reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a very inopportune time, even though my internet is still okay, I could still use this phone, and I'm
Yeah, right.
connected to my Wi-Fi anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were talking about you were related to somebody. I wanted to check who it was. Was it Bertrand Russell you were related to?
No, Fenner Brockway. So I don't know where you got up to.
Finn Brooklyn. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's
Yeah,
right.
I
So I
kind of got
guess,
confused. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess, yeah. Like essentially, I guess just splice it when you're putting it together and cut at the appropriate point. Yeah. So I was just going to say that. I guess I'll just okay. I'll start again, maybe on that
Yeah.
topic. Yeah.
Sorry.
So yes, I was just saying that we had a bit of a disconnection there, but I was just saying that Claude Shannon. Uh, Looked up to Thomas Edison was his childhood hero, and then he later discovered that they were distantly related. And I was just saying, I'm related. I've mentioned in the previous episode. I'm related to a gentleman by the name of Fenner Brockway, who was the who started the or helps one of the people who started the campaign for nuclear disarmament. He was a British politician, ended up in the House of Lords, did a lot of really good stuff. Uh, he knew Bertrand Russell and he knew Eric Blair, also known as George Orwell and so forth. So he was in the Fabian Society in London, which gives something away because I'm talking about Fenner Brockway now, and then I'll get back to Claude in a moment. But old Fenner Brockway was a socialist, and
Hmm.
a lot of people who were, movers and shakers and who were really reformists in that period, the late 19th century, early 20th century, a lot of them were. And the Fabian Society, of course, was a centre for that sort of thing. Bertrand Russell and all the rest of them, and they were all socialists together.
Yep.
But of course, I think socialism to a certain extent, I know I'm deviating a little bit here. To a certain
Hmm.
extent, I kind of give them a bit of a pass because the worst excesses of socialism had not yet made themselves evident. That's the way I sort of feel about it. Um, I think they had a much better excuse than people do today. That's kind of, because
Not yeah. Yeah. No excuse today. So,
no, exactly. That's right. Exactly. Whereas in the late 19th century, they might have been able to sort of maintain, a sort of a puppies and puppies and clouds idea of socialism in regards to some aspects of it, while they were trying to do good things. But it really was true that a lot of the reformers at that time were socialists and so forth. But I do see them as quite different to the socialists of today, and they certainly weren't militant or anything. A lot of them they wanted to do the right thing. And then anyway, old Fenner Brockway was one of them. Yeah, a lot of reformers at that time were Ernest Belford Bax. That's what I was trying to think of, the early MRA. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So Ernest Belford Bax was probably among the first people to openly call himself a men's rights activist. He was also a socialist, and I haven't definitively established that he knew Fenner Brockway. However, they were members of the Fabian Society at the same time, so they probably at least met each other. Anyway,
Mm.
so it goes to show that at that time, a lot of the people who were trying to do good in the world were in the Fabian Society and so forth. So anyway, that was all Fenner Brockway. Back to Claude. So Claude Shannon, yes, he was related to his childhood hero Thomas Edison. I think that's great. Uh, he did some amazing stuff though. He was the first. Apparently the first, we can't, I guess we don't ever definitively say this, but he appears to have been the first to have applied Boolean logic to circuits. And this is, of course, fundamental to computing. So,
Right. Yeah.
yep, he was also a major contributor to information theory and cryptography. Some people call him the father of cryptography. So that sort of goes to show how influential he was, even though his name today is not one that you hear mentioned very often. He actually
No.
did early work on AI, and he actually did something that I think is kind of cool. He developed it was about the 1950s, I think he was doing this. He put together a physical uh, mouse maze, okay, and then he
Hmm.
created an electronic mouse that was capable of learning and remembering. And he put the mouse in the mouse maze, and of course, it was programmed to try to find the exit. But after it had found the exit, you could put it in the maze, and it would go straight to the exit again because it could remember this
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
electronic
Hmm.
mouse. And of course, I want to make it clear when I talk about electronic mouse here, I'm talking about some sort of little simulated, rodent, not a computer mouse in any way. This is an electronic rodent
Right.
that he set up. and he could change the parts of the maze, put it in an unfamiliar part, and it would search around. And as soon as it had found a familiar part again, it would then immediately proceed to the exit. So, and he
Mhm.
was doing this in the 1950s. So it was an early work on AI. And again, reiterating something that has been mentioned in a previous topic, uh, AI has very much been two steps forward, one step back since that time. AI is not a new thing. It's been around for decades, as we can see with the work of Claude Shannon. And it's been long on promises and short on results for decades and decades and decades. And yes,
Mhm.
the modern AI tools are great insofar as they can be used to do to do work more quickly than we could have previously in some work more quickly than we could have previously. But I think it's always important to understand their limitations and understand that it really has been a hard slog to get to this point. For a lot of people, AI came on their radar in 2022 when ChatGPT launched, but that's not really what happened. That was the end result of 50 plus years of work. So, in fact, a lot more, 50 to 70 years of work.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, just bear that in mind when using AI and so forth. It's not something that happened miraculously. It's the end result of decades and decades and decades of work. Mostly men who were there slogging without a lot of recognition to get us where we are now. So anyway,
Sounds good.
so yeah,
Hmm.
so Claude Shannon passed away in 2001. So he saw the internet, but he didn't necessarily see the heavy commercialization of the internet
Hmm.
or the post-September 11 world that we live in today. So
Yes.
anyway, interesting character and absolutely a great man of history for his work in cryptography and AI and information theory and so forth. I think any one of those would probably qualify. I think this is someone. Yeah, as I said, I stopped short of calling him a polymath, but gosh, he was pretty good in a wide variety of
Hmm.
areas there. So
Yeah, sure.
anyway.
Well, I'm looking at his hobbies right now, and he built a flame-throwing trumpet, a rocket-powered frisbee, plastic foam shoes for navigating a lake, and a device that solves the Rubik Cube puzzle, juggling machines, and a Roman numeral computer.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah. Are you sure he's not a polymath?
Well, maybe he's bordering on the last. Could I say the last true polymath? No, no.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I must admit, it's probably the most compelling argument I've heard in a while for one in the modern
Mm.
era. That is pretty broad. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Right,
Um,
yeah.
he probably would have been a very interesting person to know, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Mm.
yeah, Claude Shannon. I'm going to put him on STEM 365. I think if I can, STEM 365. I haven't actually checked his date of birth. I can only have one person from each date of birth, one man from each date of birth on there. I haven't actually checked his date of birth yet to make sure, see if I can do that. But if I can, I'll put him on
Right. Hmm.
on STEM 365, and he's absolutely down as a great man of history. The only one I have left is Zoe McClellan.
Yeah, I think it's best because of the circumstances, I kind of want to be sure this thing is well put together. So
Yes, yes. And so as I'm watching you right now, you're actually sideways on your phone, so I imagine that'll be fixed
I'll
before.
I'll I'll fix it in post. I know how
I'm
to.
sure you would. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So as of June 2026, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McClellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. And a few people have talked to me about this, I'll just add, over the years. And I'm putting my money on Costa Rica, actually. I think that's where she is. So, but don't give up. But that doesn't mean don't look elsewhere. If you're in the US, keep her in mind. If you're in Canada, keep her in mind. Who knows? She could be anywhere. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.